Gators Breakdown episode 47 is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And I'm joined by my co-host, Joey Vizzi. You can find him on Twitter at JoeyV_SEC Sports. Joey, we missed you earlier in the week. How you doing, my friend?
Pretty good, man. It's hot down here. As you know, feels like winter was like one weekend, and it's over now. So I know Barrett's up in Atlanta, so I'm pretty sure he's been getting some cold weather up there. I know they had a little bit of snow this year, but down here in Florida, we're dealing with 85 degrees today.
Yeah, air conditioner is still kicking pretty hard in February. So, as Joey mentioned, joining us on this episode of Gators Breakdown is Barrett Sallee. You can find Barrett on Sirius XM and his own podcast, SEC Smothered and Covered, on the VSporto network. Barrett, I cannot thank you enough for joining us here on Gators Breakdown.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Just mention where people can find you on Twitter and what you got coming up. With things on with Sirius and VSporto.
Yeah, SEC Smothered and Covered podcast once a week. We should have Hugh Freeze on this week's episode, trying to track down Kevin Sumlin for next week or week after. So, keep an eye out for that. Follow on Twitter at Barrett Sallee, Facebook Barrett Sallee, BarrettSallee, and Sirius XM, College Sports Nation. Just whenever. Usually in March and April, there's a lot more of whenever because it's spring football. So that is kind of my wheelhouse. So. There'll be more of that. But, after National Signing Day and before spring practice is like one of the two times throughout the course of the year that we sort of get a little bit of a break in this sport, although Alabama's offensive coordinator search is certainly making that less of the case this year. But so hitting up Colorado next week and then Disney World in the first week of March. So trying to do the family thing and the vacation thing as much as possible before spring football starts and a new endeavor comes.
Yeah, I think we're kind of thinking along the same lines here.
I must say, Barry, you are one of the most entertaining follows on Twitter. I must say, you are. I love your satire and your kind of humor. I get along with it well, and I really enjoy following you on Twitter. And I recommend everybody out there to go give him a follow because it's not just about sports. You know, he's a big Bachelor fan, and I always enjoy his Bachelor tweets, and it's just funny, some of the tweets that people send you and then your responses to those is just, I get a kick out of that.
Thank you. People get really mad online about things they don't want to hear about. It's really easy to ignore. And people are like, well, why? I follow you for sports. Well, you follow me for me. Like, I like watching trash TV. That's America's finest comedy. I like watching Supercross on Saturday nights. I like, complaining about the Falcons not running the dang ball in the Super Bowl. Look, I mean, it's so
everybody sweet. In America is complaining about that.
They don't have to run it. Just take three snaps and have Matt Ryan trip over the center. Like, it really is that easy.
Steve Sarkisian will run the ball.
Keep saying it. God, can he go back in time? Does he have a DeLorean? Because I could use him.
And I guess to make it entertaining again, I guess you could pick Tennessee to win the SEC East again if you want to.
2 straight years, although last year I don't know if anybody really won the East. It was more of a everybody just kind of was mired in mediocrity, and one team just sort of came out. And I mean, look, I think Tennessee, they missed a golden opportunity because it's not going to get any easier. And especially for them, because they had that roster is and was loaded, and they had some bad luck, they had some bad coaching, that was not their only window, but it was as wide as it will ever be because Georgia's only getting better, Florida's only getting better. I mean, hell, even Kentucky's halfway decent. Missouri's might be not bad this year, so. There was no time like last year, and they found a way to Butch Jones that thing up. That's for sure.
Quick question, Barrett, before we dive into some Gator stuff about Tennessee. Do you think that Butch Jones is holding that program back? Because I do.
Well, I think he did last year. I think it's hard to say he's holding them back because, from the start of his career there, they've improved every year up until last year where they finished with the same record they had the year before. And that was, it's a different case, obviously. And it doesn't feel like neutral. It feels like a regression because in reality it was based on the landscape of the SEC East. But I wouldn't say he's holding them back. I think he did build them into a contender for the division title. That's something he deserves credit for. And I think last year he mismanaged that roster. And I think if you catch him privately, he'll admit that. But he's going to have to change how he goes about his business. So if it continues, yes, he's holding them back. I don't necessarily think 1 year, is enough to say that he's the problem, because up until that point, he was a big part of the solution. I just don't think he's really comfortable dealing with big-time college football with a target on his back. That's not to say that he can't figure that out. His first go-round, though, he didn't do a good job with that.
Yeah, I think
Do you feel that –
okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I just think follow that up just quickly. It's weird. I guess you could say it this way. He's the problem and the solution at the same time.
It's true. No, I mean, it is true. I mean, he inherited a big giant mess there, and he did a lot to change it, and he's done a lot to change it. And the reason 9 wins with a bowl win is not acceptable is due in part to what he's done, and he did it. And the fact that it's not acceptable anymore is something he created, and he's going to have to figure out what his ceiling is, because right now it is 9 wins. That's a huge improvement from Derek Dooley, but it's not good enough if it continues over and over again.
What do you think next year is going to hold Barrett as far as Butch Jones's future? Do you think that he has to reach a certain win mark next year, or he's gone, especially with the athletic director that hired him gone now? Or do you think that got a little leverage going into the 2018 season, or a little leeway, so to say? Or do you think if he does not, get back to the 9 wins next year, do you think that he's out the door?
I don't necessarily think it's a number, because, I mean, not all 8-win, 9-win seasons are created equal. I mean, I don't think Texas A&M's 8-win season this year or last year was the same as the previous 2 years. But with Kevin Sumlin, it doesn't matter at this point. That's just who he is. Yeah. I think with Tennessee, it depends on the new athletic director. I guess it depends on if there's a new athletic director, because that seems like it's taking a little bit of a long time. But then B, who it is, and C, what the record actually looks like, because I mean, they get Alabama and LSU. They've still got Georgia, which I think is going to be a better team. They've still got Florida, which historically has been a problem for them. And then they're Tennessee, so you can chalk up 1 or 2 inexplicable losses every single season. So from that perspective, there is a win total. I think 8 wins in the regular season, he's on shaky ground. That's not to say it's going to be a certainty one way or the other. But 8 regular season wins, I think, probably makes the conversation of, okay, what are the 8 and what are the 4 and what do those 4 look like?
Yeah, I think Kevin Sumlin's a dead man walking, in my opinion, but that's just me.
Well, he doesn't have a quarterback, so yeah, I would think. Yeah. I like Kevin Sumlin too.
Yeah, he seems like a great guy. He just seems like one of those guys. He just can't get over the hump. So
yeah, I mean, and like I said, like at some point, I hate cliches because they're not ever really true. But at some point, you are what your record is. In 2014. Kenny Hill happened, obviously, and Jake Spavital happened. So in 15, Kyle Allen happened, Jake Spavital happened. In 16, you had Trevor Knight get hurt and Myles Garrett get hurt. So guess what? When your best defensive player and your best offensive player get hurt, typically you start to suck. But again, at this point, 8-4 is 8-4 for Kevin Sumlin. You are what your record is.
And they do make a trip to the Swamp coming up this fall, so that'd be interesting. So before we dive into our Gators talk with Barrett, I just want to let you know you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Just search on those sites or get the links by following us on Twitter at Gators Breakdown, and on Facebook, just search Gators Breakdown. Also, share the show if you like it and leave a review and rate on iTunes. And let's break down some Gators football with Barrett Sallee. So Barrett, in your last Smothered and Covered show, you mentioned Florida as one of the biggest mysteries and enigma in all of college football, and of course mostly to do with the offense. So let me ask you this: if Florida finds competent quarterback play this fall, what is the outlook for this team? And if they don't find it, is it enough to win the SEC East again?
If they don't find it, no. I don't think it's enough to win the SEC East, because I do think Georgia is going to be pretty darn good this year. And I think the reason Florida's won it the last 2 years, despite really hectic quarterback issues, was a defense that was just loaded with just freaks. And a lot of those freaks are gone. And that's not to say that there aren't other freaks on that roster. But, I mean, you're talking about, a run of players in the secondary dating back to really Hargrave's first year that is really hard to top. And while some of these players that they've got back there are good, they're not Quincy Wilson, Jalen Tabor. I mean, they're just not. And so, combine that with Brantley being gone and Anzalone and Davis and really, the new defensive coordinator and Shannon. I mean, that's a lot of defensive turnover and a lot of defensive holes that need to be filled that in years past really carried the team. So if they don't get the offense fixed and get the quarterback situation fixed and the offensive line fixed, I don't know if they'll be able to rely on defense as much as they have in years past. The long answer to a pretty short question and what should be an easy question to answer is no. I mean, I think if they don't get the offense turned around, I don't think they win the East. If they do get the offense turned around, I mean, the ceiling is playoff contention. But that again, it depends on how much it gets turned around. And how much the defense maintains, because it's probably going to take a little bit of a step back, but it can't take a giant leap back.
Absolutely, Barrett. I couldn't agree more. This season is based on the offensive production. I mean, it is. The defense is going to have a drop off. I don't think it's going to be a huge drop off because our biggest curse this year was our biggest blessing with defense. A lot of the young guys got to play, especially at the linebacker position, due to Alex Anzalone getting injured, Jared Davis, Marcus May, some big time draft picks coming up did get injured. And a lot of the young guys did get to step up that are going to be starters next year. And I do believe that the return of Randy Shannon as the defensive coordinator is going to help this defense out a lot. I had discussed this with one of our other co-hosts, Bill Sykes, last week or 2 weeks ago, that I think the Randy Shannon to defensive coordinator is only going to simplify things for these young guys, because this is a voice that they're used to. This is a voice that has been there since the beginning of the Jim McElwain era. Defense is definitely going to drop off. I think we'd be naive to think that it wouldn't. But if the defense could be 75% of what it's been the last 2 seasons, I think that's good enough. But like you said, Barrett, I think the offense has to go north. And if it doesn't, the season's going to go south for the Gators. 9 returning starters on offense, Barrett. The offensive line, this is probably the best offensive line Florida's going to have that they've had in years. I know you've said the last 2 years that the offensive line has been a huge question mark for Florida, and we've witnessed it game after game. And this year, finally, Florida's offensive line is going to be healthy and has a lot of veterans, which is fantastic. If Franks or Trask step up to the plate and are just have a pulse, and can be productive. I think Florida's offense with the running game with LaMichael Pirine and Jordan Scarlett returning, and I mean the elite weapons that Florida has in Antonio Callaway and Tyree Cleveland and coming back, and big time receivers, just all over the place. I think Florida's offense is going to be just fine. But like you said, Barrett, I think Florida's offense has to get better. If it does not, I wouldn't be surprised if Florida's staring an 8-4 season in the face. But if Florida's exactly like you said, Barrett, if Florida's offense is productive and the defense is just 75% of what it was, I think Florida is a playoff team. I think they are an 11 or a 12 win team next year. And, that's the big mystery. And it's going to be fun to see this spring, because obviously Luke Del Rio is not going to get a chance to compete. Not that we want him to anyway. But he's not going to get a chance to even touch a football this spring, which is going to, give Gator fans some promise going into spring practice next week. That it's going to be basically a Trask and Frank's show this spring. So we're going to see the young guys. We're going to see a McElwain quarterback actually take snaps from center, and it's going to be exciting, Barrett. And like I said, I couldn't agree more with what you said.
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback situation is interesting because, I mean, Felipe Franks, is a guy that McElwain targeted for a long time. I mean, even when he was an LSU commit, and they really like him, and the discussion to burn his red shirt in the bowl game was real. I said it should happen. I know McElwain said that obviously it wasn't a week after, bowl practice started, but I think that the problem with either Trask or Franks is that, there is an element and a risk of shell shock because Michigan is Michigan. And, if you ask Max Brown how Alabama lingered with him until he got benched and replaced by Sam Darnold for USC last year. That was a guy who was a graduate or about graduated. Now he is a graduate. This is a first time player playing in a huge game to start his career. You almost have to start Del Rio in that game and then weave somebody else in, whether it's Trask or Franks, through the course of the game, just to have something there, some insurance policy in case, the lights are too bright for one of the young guys. But it will go with the offensive line and quarterback because, I think the biggest problems over the course of the last two seasons really haven't been the revolving door quarterbacks, Greer suspension, the Treon Harris debacle, than Del Rio's injuries. I think it's offensive line. It is better, but they have to play better. Experience doesn't necessarily equal success. It usually does with offensive lines. It doesn't necessarily always do it. So those guys are going to have to protect the quarterback, give them give whoever it is the chance to succeed. I like Felipe Franks. I think he can be a star. They may need him to be a star this year. And Kyle Trask is a guy that, I know the coaches love him, and I get that. He is the biggest mystery in college football. Like, legitimately, he didn't start on his high school team because they didn't run the right system. But he can run McElwain's system, they think. And everybody thinks it. His high school coach, the coaching staff at Florida, everybody. But literally, he hasn't really played a lot of football. Like, he just has not played football. So do you want to throw him out against Michigan? I mean, good luck, kid. It's good. That's why Florida's so interesting to me, because these are guys that, theoretically fit the system that theoretically is supposed to work from the coach that theoretically is an offensive genius and just has not shown it through two seasons. At this point, if it happens again, then I think you start having referendums on what kind of big game coach or big time coach Jim McElwain actually is.
So Barrett, let me get this straight. I think you mentioned it. So you said you would start Luke Del Rio versus Michigan?
I think Jim McElwain will. I wouldn't.
Okay.
I would start Felipe Franks and just
I don't think Michigan. Barrett, we were just talking on our show last week about Michigan, but kind of looking forward to that game. Michigan's lost about 100 players to graduation and attrition, and I just don't think Michigan's going to be the team that we've seen, the last 2 years under Harbaugh, just due to strictly, no experience. Obviously their quarterback's coming back, but they're losing all their best playmakers. Sure. Rashawn Gary's coming back, obviously, but all their best playmakers that have started for about 10 years at Michigan are gone. And, I think that's going to be a big advantage to Florida due to the 9 starters returning on offense.
No, I mean, I think that's a legitimate point. With that said, they're still talented kids. I mean, they're still really good players. And I don't necessarily think they're going to be blinded by anything that Florida does offensively in game one. So it's that's what makes that matchup so interesting because, I mean, you're talking about Rashawn Gary, perhaps Aubrey Solomon playing as a true freshman, and all of the Harbaugh recruits who, may have been bit players for a while, actually becoming role players after Hokies players have moved on. So, no, I mean, in some sense, both Florida and Michigan are kind of in similar places on both sides of the ball because you've seen a lot of Muschamp guys move on. Muschamp was a recruiting machine. We all know that. Now it's McElwain's guys. Same thing with Harbaugh's guys at Michigan. So, I'm interested to see how that game goes down. I think it can set the tone for both programs one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree there. And so, I mean, Ed Barrett, I've been told, Twitter people have come after me saying, they agree with you. McElwain will start Del Rio. So not a lot of confidence in McElwain to stray away and start one of the freshmen. But, of course, spring practice is big with that. But Barrett, how much can we take away from spring practice? We saw what Luke Del Rio did in the spring game last year, where I believe 10 of 11 for 170 something yards and 2 touchdowns, I believe. And then one of the first couple games of the season, lights up Kentucky, and Florida thinks they have something there, and it kind of just fell south after he got his knee injured versus North Texas. Is it what do you look for in spring practice from Felipe Franks and Kyle Trask? What can you take away as a positive and say, oh, it's nothing but spring practice?
It's not anything they do or don't do. I mean, it's not scrimmage stats. It's not, because, there's always that one scrimmage where every quarterback throws for like 700 yards, and completes more passes than they attempt. I look for what the coaches ask them to do, because I think you can find out a lot about, in a spring game. And this is kind of what I remember writing this after Florida spring game last year. It looked like they were giving Del Rio the offense. It looked like they were hiding everybody else. Even though Del Rio succeeded and had a great game, that wasn't the most important thing. It looked like they had the trust in him and were asking him to make the tough throws, asking him to do things in situations that they weren't asking the other guys to do. So that's what I think in spring games, which is really the only glimpse of these guys you actually get to see in spring. Because everything that comes out during spring practice is on purpose. It's very controlled information because everybody's paranoid in every program across the country. So the biggest thing is take what the narrative is, whatever the narrative is for each team, person, whatever in the spring. Watch the spring games and find and look at what they're asking them to do. Because, in Florida's case at the quarterback position, Kyle Trask may, have a better game statistically, but it may be a lot easier for him to have a better game statistically if they're asking Franks to do more. And if they're asking Franks to do more, then you already know your answer about who's number one.
David, I know you had said this actually like midway through the season about you hearing that Franks is, come leaps and bounds from what he was in the spring game last year. We know what his spring game record was, three passes, 3 interceptions. So it wasn't very good, but Franks in high school, he really didn't have any coaching. He was just a star player that was just so talented that his coaches basically told him to play backyard football. Time receiver there at Wakulla that he could just throw the ball to, and he would be there to get it. We know Franks played for a state championship. So the talent is certainly there. And being, a year in the system, in McElwain's system, because he wasn't an early enrollee, Barrett, don't you think that Franks, the coaches, are going to go into spring maybe with a little more confidence in him to start a game against Michigan? Like you had said about, McElwain might want to start Del Rio. Don't you think maybe a year later and Jim McElwain kind of hearing the noise? I know he really isn't about hearing the noise and stuff like that, but he knows. They hear the noise. He knows exactly what the boosters and the fans are saying. Believe that if Franks does show something in the spring, do you not believe that the coaches kind of want him to be the guy, especially with him being a 4-star guy?
I do think they want him to be the guy. There's no doubt. But I don't necessarily think they want him to feel the pressure of game one as a starter yet. I think maybe he earns that right this summer. If he wins over the team and. That's really when that aspect of being the quarterback actually comes to fruition, when you have the full complement of players there on campus and you actually can go win a team. He could. There's no doubt about it. I would run that risk regardless, just because you're not going to win the SEC East with Luke Del Rio. So you need to get your guy ready. So it's certainly a possibility. But I think more than anything else, it's about winning the team. And if there's a debate, or if it's close, I think most coaches will err on the side of the veteran, at least temporarily, knowing that at times you can sort of weave your youngster in. Look what Alabama did last year. Blake Barnett was by no means a veteran. He was a redshirt freshman. He started against USC. He played 2-3 series. They put Jalen Hurts in because they knew Jalen Hurts was the guy. He had already won over the team. And he was fine. He had a great game against USC after the first snap, and things were good. So that, I think that's, when it comes to coaches, that's the easy thing to do. And sometimes the easy thing is the right thing to do. But it's up to Franks to A, prove he can handle the playbook, and B, win over the team. proving he knows the playbook is actually the easier part when the competition to winning over the team is the guy who started last year and won over the team last year.
Incredible, Barrett, that the University of Florida has not had a solid quarterback play in 8 years. I mean, isn't it incredible? It just, me being a University of Florida alum, just looking at the situation the last 8 years, I'm mind boggled that the recruiting and the talent-rich environment that comes to Gainesville and just the lack of quarterback play that Florida's had. And unfortunately, Barrett, and I'm sure you can back me up on this, Florida has been a quarterback away from probably a few playoff runs. I mean,
they were a quarterback away from 2 playoff runs the last 2 seasons.
So it's just we need something. We're desperate, Barrett, and that's why I just think if Luke Del Rio started that game against Michigan, I think people would walk out, including me, out of AT&T Stadium.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing with the quarterback situation. They went after Jarrett Stidham late because they needed him. Like they knew that. Like they wanted to have a guy in there that they could trust, and they felt like he was probably the most trustworthy. A guy who didn't even play junior college ball last year. I think partly because A, they needed him, and B, they're on graduate transfer probation, so they can't actually go get a graduate transfer. So all of that together makes Florida so wildly entertaining and interesting this year.
This is Gators Breakdown with David and Joey, and join Nick. This is Barrett Sallee on this episode. Barrett, there's a couple more questions before we let you go. I guess I'm asking you to project here a little bit, but do you believe Jim McElwain is the right guy, to get Florida fixed and win an SEC championship?
Not to dodge the question, can you ask me in December?
Okay.
No, I mean, it's the truth because, I mean, Florida won the last 2 SEC East championships. Other teams also lost them. I mean, I think that's, both of those things can coexist. Florida was by no means a really good team the last 2 years, but they won the SEC East. So I think I understand both sides. I understand McElwain saying, hey, look, we won the division title the last 2 years. Why can't y'all be happy? Like, of course, I get that. But I also understand, well, we can't be happy because you're the offensive guru and our offense is very much champion. I understand both sides. So, it's year 3 is year 3. And for McElwain this year, knowing that all those must-champ defensive recruits are gone, or at least most of them, what are guys like David Reese going to do, or Jabari Zuniga, guys who kind of flashed a little bit last year in spots that weren't necessarily A, highly thought of, and B, part of the plan. What are they going to do next year? And then what are you going to do offensively? Are you going to turn it around? Because this is the time. The starting quarterback should be your guy, Felipe Franks or Kyle Trask, whoever. And you've had enough time to fix all of the things that ailed the program, specifically the offensive line and the offense in general. So it's really this is a referendum year for Jim McElwain, and that's not to say he's going to get fired or that he's on the hot seat, but it's a swing year, and it'll make year 4 either really nice or really, really dangerous and really frustrating for him.
Barrett, a little off the field for you. What do you believe Jim McElwain's doing with these hires that he's just made? I think he's trying to hit home runs in the recruiting trail next year and going all in on the 2018 class. We've been discussing this the last couple of weeks, but I think the hire of, Corey Bell and Juwan Sider are just, home run hires, and McElwain made a huge statement by making those hires.
Yeah, I mean, Juwan Sider particularly because he's got ties to South Florida, in the West Palm area, and really that kind of is Randy Shannon's neighborhood too. But having a position coach that can get into those high schools a little bit better, and B, coach running backs. I mean, Juwan Sider had some really good running backs at West Virginia. People kind of view West Virginia as this air raid team because of Holgerson and Red Bull and all that stuff. They run the dang ball. Like, they run the dang ball well. So I mean, I like Sider a lot. I think that's the one that sort of jumped out to me. Like, that's a good solid hire. And really, I mean, McElwain said, they need to get better on the recruiting trail. I think the one thing that maybe he misjudged when he got the job was maybe the difficulty or lack thereof, in his mind anyway, of recruiting at Florida. I think that he thought that Florida could recruit itself a little bit better than it actually can. And so he went more with coaches that are, for lack of a better term, X's and O's friendly. and realize that, you do have to work your tail off even at Florida to recruit. So now he's making the proper adjustment. I think they'll be fine. And that's the one thing with McElwain. That's the one thing that sort of jumps out to me is for everything that he did well, building his reputation, he's never really been known as a great recruiter. He's been a good recruiter, but he was never that great at it. So to make an error in judgment like that early on was a little surprising, but he's done a lot to correct it. And, we'll see if it paid off. It certainly paid off on National Signing Day. I got raked over the coals for saying that Florida should be scared to death about the recruiting class 2 weeks before National Signing Day. And they should have been. I'd stand by that. They should have been.
We talked about it too. It was there.
And then they jump up to 10, 11, 12, depending on the service on National Signing Day, which is good. It's not great, but that they'll be great next year because they'll have guys in there for a full cycle.
Coffee is for closers, Barrett, and Jim McElwain gets a whole pot of coffee because he closed. I mean, Florida jumped 15 spots in a matter of 48 hours. With the Elijah Conliffe and then stealing basically C.J. Henderson right from underneath Miami's nose and Brian Edwards and which is awesome. But I think McElwain, what you were saying about him about being a great, I think McElwain prides himself on out other coaches, and not so much out recruiting them. I think he looks for the guys that not too many people are paying attention to. And he says, I can make that guy be a great football player, which is awesome. Last year, I mean, look at Jabari Zuniga, like you just mentioned, David Reese and Kylan Johnson, guys that weren't really being heavily recruited, and they flashed out of your TV screen last year. So, I think, and I think he realizes now, I think he thought that the first 2 years that he could do that he can out scout other coaches and turn 3-stars into 5-star players. And I think he's realizing now that the ceiling is only high so high for those guys. And Bill Sykes and I and David talked about this the last 2 weeks, is that you have to have some 5-stars on your team to win. You just do. I mean, it's we talked about Clemson didn't really have that great of classes, leading up, but they still were hanging around with some 5-stars. I mean, look on their team right now. Deshaun Watson was the number 1 dual threat quarterback out of high school that Dabo got, and they got a couple guys here out of Florida. So, beat out Florida, beat out Will Muschamp for some stud players. So, I just think that McElwain has learned the error of his ways, so to say. And I think that's what the hires mean to me, is that he really knows that he has to get a 5-star, maybe 2, maybe 3, to really beat Alabama. Alabama's a standard, Barrett, and we know this, this right now. And until, you knock the king off the mountain, you're just going to be second best. And that's what Florida's been the last 2 years, is second best. And I think McElwain knows that he really has to get in the living rooms and really knock some doors down and kick some doors down to improve and kind of get over the hill of just winning the East by default, as you said.
Well, are you trying to say that coaches have egos? Get out of here.
Hey, he can win with Clarabelle.
I love Jim McElwain, but they all have egos. Every single one.
He's a Saban product. He learned from the best.
They love the mirror, all of them.
Barrett, before we let you go, I think we'll try and talk to you before this, but when SEC Media Days comes along, it'll probably be Georgia, Florida, Tennessee in that order. When the media makes their picks. Who do you see might be that 4th team and can make this a 4-team race in the SEC East?
I can't believe I'm going to say this, Kentucky, because
it's not a stretch.
I mean, the quarterback was great down the stretch. Robert Johnson was awesome. The running game was really, really good. I know Boom left, but they've still got some studs behind him. The wide receiving core is pretty darn solid. The offensive line lost 1 guy, and then defensively, they weren't great last year, but they were young. So
they got better as the year went on. They really did.
And I mean, they were pretty good last. I mean, they were not good. I mean, by SEC East standards, they were halfway decent last year. So
the Heisman Trophy winner had like 8 turnovers against him.
Yeah,
so, I mean that's pretty good.
They closed on a high note. Well, they lost a tech on to close, but yeah, I mean they closed the regular season on a high note. So I mean, Kentucky. Missouri, to me, would not surprise me if they jumped up too. And I know that sounds crazy. Drew Lock was really good last year with an average offensive line a running game that didn't get going until midseason, and a star wide receiver in Jamon Moore, who, despite having 1,000 yards receiving, had like 500 drops. I mean, every single pass he dropped. And then defensively, they can't get worse. I mean, they literally can't. Yeah. So, maybe Missouri.
All right. Barrett, anything else you want to shout out there for Gator fans before you get off here?
No, just it should be fun. I can't wait. Get Florida, Tennessee, and A&M. All three of them spring practice wise. The three most interested spring practice sessions I'm wanting to see. I think those three are going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see what happens.
Same here. Joey, anything else for?
What's your prediction? What's your prediction for Florida with good quarterback play? With good quarterback
play. I don't have the won loss records in front of me. I would say second in the East. I think Georgia's going to be better. I think Georgia's going to be really good this year.
All right, that's Barrett Sallee with an early prediction. Georgia pulling out the SEC East. So Barrett, you can hang on, or you can just exit out however you want to do it, man. I know you got some kids and wife to get to, so Joey and I understand that too. So.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
We'd love to have you back on before the season starts, if that's okay, in August.
Anytime, sure. Just let me know.
All right, Barrett. Thanks so much, man. And that was Barrett Sallee, Joey. That was some good stuff there.
Oh, he's very knowledgeable. Like I said, I had him on my radio show last spring, and he was just spitting knowledge. So he knows his stuff. He's around the programs. He does this for a living. So we got other jobs. This is our side thing. This is his thing. So right. He knows, and he talks to the coaches and talks to the players, and he's around the program, so he knows what he's doing and he knows what he's talking about. So wasn't too thrilled with his Tennessee prediction the last year, and how he was driving that bandwagon. We told him that the bandwagon was going to go off the cliff in flames, but he stuck with it. He went down with a ship. So you got to give him credit.
Always owns up to it. And he always owns up to it. He'll pin that tweet.
I can't fault him for the Georgia pick this year. Everybody's doing it.
Bill and I talked about that our last show. How if I had to pick right now, and if Florida was in that same situation as Georgia in, of course,
In us being honest right now, Florida is a question mark. We'll even say that, and it all depends on if Franks or Trask are the guy and how they do. Yep. I don't think Florida's going to get as fortunate this year without good quarterback play. We can agree that. Barrett said that. We agree. The defense is just not going to be as good just due to, attrition and guys leaving for the draft. But like I said, the defense, if it could be 75% of what it's been the last 2 years, and Florida gets good offensive production, the ceiling is the sky's the limit for this team, and that's the thing. I'm just really not willing to make a prediction that Florida's going to, go back to Atlanta again until I see some effective quarterback play. And after all the spring practice and the spring games we've watched, I'm not really ready to make that prediction until a couple games into the season this year.
Same here. We mentioned Luke Del Rio going off and getting us all excited. Well, I think we've I'll calm down. It doesn't matter if Franks goes 12 for 12 for 200 yards. Yeah.
It's all just a dog and pony show. It's scripted. McElwain's on the field with his whistle and his playbook, so it's not going to be even. I'll actually get more from watching the defense, David, this spring than I will any but the quarterbacks or the offense, because the defense to me is gonna really show what they're gonna be. Who's gonna start at defense? Who are we going to see any of the freshmen start at defense in August in fall practice? You got some studs coming in. We talked about Brad Stewart, being possibly starting as a freshman. We talked about CJ Henderson possibly starting as a freshman. So we just don't know. And that's what I'm more interested in, depth on the defensive side of the ball. The quarterback situation will kind of work itself out, David. Whether McElwain's going to go with Del Rio, which we all hope and pray that's never going to happen again, or else Franks is going to be the guy, which we all kind of assume that's going to happen. It just depends on. It's crazy how there's the most important position in football basically is what Florida season hinges on this year.
Agree. So you can check out our last episode where we've kind of talked about how Florida could go if things fell right with myself and Bill. And Joey, I mean, I'll get your opinion from I mean, we've kind of already just kind of hit on it, but just I mean, how far? And you asked Barrett the question: if Florida figures out their quarterback situation, the sky is the limit. If they don't figure it out, you mentioned 8-4, 7-5. If it just doesn't get going the right way, is it? I mean, if you had to just early projection right now, I mean, if Florida figures it out, are they a playoff contender again?
Well, absolutely. And simply because the schedule is extremely favorable this year, David. We talked about that on previous show. Florida gets all their toughest games at home this year, obviously the Georgia game in Jacksonville, but until Georgia beats Florida, I'm not really willing to say that Georgia's going to beat Florida, just simply based on, Georgia just can't beat Florida right now. And the record speaks for itself. Florida gets Tennessee at home, which is huge. Tennessee, I think, is going to have a down year. I actually think Tennessee is going to be not very good this year. I don't even think they're going to finish in the top 4 in the SEC this year. I could see Kentucky and Missouri.
Okay.
I meant to say SEC. Sorry. I can see Kentucky in Missouri, or even possibly Vanderbilt finishing ahead of Tennessee this year in the standings, just simply based on Tennessee losing too many players. And, Tennessee has a lot of 5-star hearts, but not a lot of 5-star recruits. So
they got to get that. They got to get that defense fixed too. I mean,
exactly.
Season, that was a joke.
And when you lose, you're probably one of your best defensive players in history.
Yeah. Yep.
It's huge. And, you're losing your star running back, both of them, technically. You're losing your quarterback that was there starting for 4 years. You're starting a redshirt freshman this year in Guantanamo. We just don't know. He's a question mark as well. But Georgia's probably the team to beat, David. We just talked about that. Yep. And but with Florida, the schedule favors Florida. Texas A&M at home. Texas A&M's a huge question mark. We know Kevin Sumlin is what he is. He's an 8-4 guy walking.
Right. And look at what everything they lose coming into the swamp. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
Florida's going to be. Florida's very fortunate. A lot of the teams they're playing this year, quarterback situations for the other teams don't really favor the other teams. LSU, question mark at quarterback. Texas A&M, question mark at quarterback. Tennessee, question mark at quarterback. Florida gets 2 teams with returning starters, I think, or 3 teams with returning starters on their schedule, in the games that matter. You got Michigan with their returning starting quarterback. You got Florida State, obviously, with Francois, and Georgia with Eason. So Florida's very fortunate that, the other games, 9 games on their schedule are with questionable quarterback play. So that's going to favor Florida. So the ceiling is the sky's the limit for this team if quarterback play is good. And if it's not, David, I really, really don't want to see what December 2017 is going to look like for Jim McElwain. I don't.
Yeah. So we'll definitely break down the schedule more as we get closer to the season. We got plenty of time. Spring practice coming up in about 2 weeks or so. So of course, more spring practice start. But we'll break down that schedule closer, definitely to the season. But Joey, I tweeted out today. I mean, just think about the first 3 weeks of the season: Michigan, Northern Colorado, Tennessee. I mean, that's 2 of those 3 games right there. I mean, that could make your season. You 1-1. I think fans will take. Not necessarily be happy, joy about it, but I think take 1-1 because you definitely want to beat.
2-1.
I mean, well, yeah, but I'm sorry, I'm counting the big games.
Yeah,
2-1 for sure. Would be happy, but losing to Michigan, you can't come out 2 weeks later and lose to Tennessee at home. That would, I think, set the downward trend and really raise the voices of fans that wouldn't be happy there. But 1-1 out of Michigan and Tennessee, I think wouldn't leap for joy, but I think take it. But 2-0, I tell you what, if Frank Trask is the guy, you go to Dallas and get a win, and the quarterback plays well, there's no telling what kind of spark that can set up.
Yeah, we can both agree that Michigan's probably going to be a top 5 team. When Florida faces off against them, I see Michigan maybe. Yeah, I could see Michigan maybe 5, 5, 6 around there, and I could see Florida around maybe 16, 17,
right,
in the preseason. And so I think it's it's definitely going to be a top 20 matchup. But imagine the momentum that Florida's going to receive just the buzz about Florida after, if a win happens, in national television on a, Saturday night game, prime time. So, that's huge. And it's huge for recruiting. We talked about that with Bill. It's huge for recruiting. Recruits are going to be watching that game everywhere, recruits across the country. And then you got Northern Colorado, obviously kind of a rest up game, maybe a warm up game.
Yep.
Coming to the Swamp. This is a revenge game, David, against Tennessee. You could argue Tennessee spoiled Florida's season last year. Kind of Florida, again, limped into the SEC championship game. We discussed it, the last 2 seasons, with 3 losses. And, it just wasn't a good look. And, I really want Florida to take revenge on Tennessee for kind of killing the momentum early in the season last year. So, and then you got Texas A&M, the first week of October?
Don't have
Is that first week of October?
Probably.
Yeah.
That's usually when they play the West.
Yeah, I think you got Texas A&M, LSU in back-to-back weeks, David.
Yes, yep, you do. Yep.
Yeah,
I do know that.
So,
for sure.
even though they're home, even though it's home and home, that's still 2 SEC West opponents. So the first 6 weeks of Florida's schedule, David, we could argue are probably the most important of their season.
For sure. And we'll talk about, like I said, the schedule, and we'll talk about the most important stretch. We'll break down that schedule a good bit coming up. So, Joey, before we sign off here, anything else? I know you're going to take a little bit of a 2-week hiatus until spring practice starts.
Yes, I'm going to take a little hiatus, like Barrett was saying. He's going on vacation with the family, so I'm gonna take a little break. I got my best friend's wedding is coming up in 2 weeks. Yeah, he's getting married in St. Augustine. So we're going to be up there in 2 weeks for like 3-4 days. So I'm going to be, in and out and kind of taking a break from the computer for a little while. And then once spring practice gets in a full swing, I'll be right back here next to you guys. So I've been here from the beginning of the season, just like you, man. And I'm ready for a little break. The recruiting season was just as bad for us, as
But if not even worse.
Worse, because we were on here just, stressed out, and, we were hanging on the window ledge. We didn't know what was going on. So, but a little break, and it's been a fun year, David. This is basically the start of the 2017 season now. It's been a fun year with you, David, and I'm so glad and honored that you had me join you as a co-host this year. Being on here weekly, the ups and downs of the season was just, it was something that I cherish, and I'm so honored and proud that I was able to be on here with you this past season. So, and I look forward to starting.
Even got the party for the cocktail party. So
yes, we did party together. Brought the wife, you brought the wife, and we had a good time and got to see a big win. So
never a bad time to beat Georgia, ever. Never gets old. Never. All right, so that's it for this show. Thank you guys for listening. Remember to subscribe and share on iTunes and leave a review if you enjoy Gators Breakdown podcast. Find on SoundCloud, YouTube. Follow me, Dave, on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC, and Joey on Twitter at JoeyV_SEC Sports, and our the other co-host, featured analyst Bill Sykes, on Twitter at RealB Sykes. So we'll get a show next week. I'm trying to pull another name in here, trying to get it in the works. So don't know for sure yet. Waiting for him to respond. So we'll see you there. But thanks to Barrett Sallee for joining us here on Gators Breakdown and giving his thoughts on the Gators. So for Joey, I'm Dave, and once again, thanks for listening to Gators Breakdown.